Hello, everyone. I am David Malinga, East Africa Bureau Chief, Bloomberg News. I am happy to host this roundtable on powering Southern Africa's recovery, focus on agriculture. Now, Southern Africa's nations continue to confront the twin challenges of COVID-19 pandemic and the low commodity prices. Foreign direct investment will be a key driver of the region's economic recovery. The UN estimates FDI inflows in Africa dropped by a whopping 18% in 2020. But even before the pandemic, inflows were declining. African policymakers and leading money managers must now think big. And to attract FDI, the region needs to see bold reforms and to open the investment floodgates and power Africa's recovery. In this discussion, we will examine the opportunities and challenges within agriculture sector of Southern Africa with the Angolan example in mind. But before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. This is a virtual event, so please bear with us in case we experience any technical issues. If Zoom crashes or you get disconnected, please close, reopen the application, refresh your browser, and just log back in. If you have any other applications or web pages open, I strongly recommend that you close them now. In some instances, they can affect your bandwidth and the ability to interact with everyone in the meeting. We want to keep this discussion very conversational, so at any time, if you would like to chip in the topic, please use the raise hand feature. At the top of your Zoom window, you will see the raise hand icon, and you can use it. If you want to speak, you can press that button, and I will try my best to get to you. And if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Don't forget to unmute if you get called on to speak. We want to make sure we hear everyone, so please make sure to keep your comments short, just about 1 or 2 minutes per question. So that we can hear everyone. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Antonio De Silva. He's the chairman of IPEX. That's the Angolan Investment Promotions Agency, and they are sponsoring today's virtual roundtable. So, Mr. Antonio De Silva, over to you for opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I am, as you said, Antonio, I'm the chairman of the APEX, which is the Agency for Private Investment and Promotion of Exports of Angola. In terms of our objective, in charge of improving the business environment, promote competition and productivity, support national production, industrialization, inclusive development, and import substitution. And also we are in charge of promoting export diversification through the increase of trade. Our core businesses are to assist companies to register, coordinate institutional support for investors, promote the increase of the diversification of the country exports of goods and services, implement policies and programs that grow export and reduce agri-food imports, and also to ensure the development of the competitiveness of national companies, as well as the internationalization into foreign markets. Basically, APEX, it's the sole counterpart in terms of relation within the public sector and the private sector and the investors that are willing to come to our country. Therefore, we are here to participate in this event and to closely with the other panelists to promote a very constructive conversation where, as a result, we believe Angola, with all its potential, will be able to be seen as a great destination for agriculture production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And on that note, I would like to introduce Samuel Nzotefe from the International Finance Corporation. Samuel is the regional manager for Sub-Saharan Africa at the IFC. Samuel, the question I have for you, how does the IFC view agriculture in Africa, and what's the investment outlook for the sector in the region?
No, thank you for the question, and really great to be part of this panel. First of all, to say that IFC views agriculture as a priority sector. mean, if you think about the fact that 65% of the world's arable land is in Africa, and Africa has abundant water resources. It has a variety of soils, climate, that can support the growth of several crops. There is no doubt that the continent could be the breadbasket for the world. And even more importantly, is the fact that agriculture is just critical for the development of the continent, in terms of job creation, income generation, especially in the rural areas, improving food security for the continent's young and growing population. And so we think agriculture is a very important and a priority sector. The food security is always a very interesting one because the African Development Bank estimates that Africa imports almost close to $35 billion per annum of food. And in 2017, Angola alone was estimated to have imported close to $3 billion. So there is no doubt that there is a need for us to invest in import substitution projects on the continent and to help conserve the limited foreign currency reserves for investments in other important sectors such as education, health, and infrastructure. Just to wind up quickly to say that the investment outlook for the continent is very bright. Already as far back as 2013, the World Bank had reported, that Africa's farmers and agribusinesses could create almost $1 trillion food business by 2013. Today we are 2021, so we are almost halfway. And we also know that the African Development Bank also estimated that close to, I'm talking about the financing gap for investments in Africa's agribusiness is probably close to about $25 to $33 billion per annum. And so, yes, David, you can see there is just huge opportunity for us to be able to invest in African agriculture sector. And I think what is more critical here is to see how can we attract the private sector, how can we attract foreign investors into the sector.
Thank you, Samuel, and great investment opportunities in there. And I'm glad you highlighted the investment gap. And we are lucky to have on the panel asset managers and money managers, including CDC, and we'll be asking them a little bit later about this. And you mentioned Angola and the $3 billion import bill for food. And I want to bring in Antonio again. Could you paint for us a picture of agriculture in Angola? What does Angola grow? What does it process? I know historically you might have been good in certain commodities, but when you tested the petrodollars, I'm not sure that continued. So could you paint for us a picture of agriculture in Angola? And what have you found to be the main barriers in attracting investment into agriculture in your country, Antonio?
Well, it's a very pertinent question. As you have said, Angola is moving away from dependency on oil to taking its full potential, which agriculture is one of those sectors where we believe that due to the existence of an extension of land of around 35 million hectares of arable land, it's possible to invest and to promote growth in that sector. So currently, our main practice in terms of agriculture is subsistence farming, which counts for the most labor and has the less productivity. Nevertheless, because of the youth unemployment rate, since it's very high and job markets can absorb all, farming, it's still synonymous with poverty, hunger, and lower standards of living. Hence, most young people are not really interested in studying agriculture. But as a solution, with where advocacy plays as an important changing the narrative and shifting mindsets. We believe recruitment of seasonal and of the unskilled, semi-skilled and graduates, and also with the promotion of agriculture, technical and vocational education, which will enable us to introduce modern farming techniques, food systems, and the usage of tools. And the government has been putting in place incentive packages that include different ways of accommodation for those that are skilled and are willing to participate in the development of agriculture through affordable social housing, personal protective equipment on a regular basis. Having said that, we already have very good examples of both industrial scale projects in agriculture, but also in terms of organized cooperatives along the country, where as a good examples and best practices, we are seeing that this is the way to go. We need to scale up, and in order to scale up, we need to attract investment, and this is what Apex is meant to play a key role in that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio, and promoting investment in it. At this point, I want to introduce Onyeka Akuma. He's a celebrated serial entrepreneur, a founder and chief executive of From Crowdy. And from the name of his company, it needs no further introduction. Onyeka, you're welcome. And I want to keep you in your element. How can digital innovation transform agriculture, not just in Angola, but in the other African countries?
All right. Thanks a lot, David, for having me. I mean, I've listened to Mr. Samuel and Mr. Antonio just speaking about the effect of the importance of agriculture, not just in Angola, but the entire Southern African region, and as it cuts across sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the things that consistently excites me is when I hear of the importance of young people in the sector. Now, young people in the sector have been driven by a lot of technological innovations across different sectors. For us in Farm Crowdy, which is based in Nigeria, pretty much in the West African region, we've taken note of this. And it comes from a place where we identified that millions of farmers were constantly finding ways to deal with some of the major problems that is experienced not just in Nigeria or in Angola, but in many African countries: access to funding, technical expertise to improve the yields from their farms, market access to sell what they produce to earn decent margins. Yet we consistently hear of uncultivated land across different countries. Nigeria has over 200 million acres of farmland, or you can say about 80 million hectares of farmland, arable farmland that is not used up to 10%. Angola has 50 million hectares of arable farmland that is not used up to 5 to 10%. And the major issue is that we see the farmers dealing with those issues around access to funding because they don't have the money to go into the farms to do the work they need to do to get the right kind of inputs to work on their farmlands. And then you come back into the value chain, and we want to get young people excited about the sector. So what I have seen is that in applying digital technology, one has to make sure that taking into consideration these points around the problems they are facing, around the availability of land, we look at the food value chain and decide which of those sectors would we apply technology to in order to improve the well-being of farmers. So if you look at the input side, for instance, you would say, how do I use technology to provide inputs better for farmers? In Farm Crowdy, we used a crowdfunding model originally to provide those inputs to the farmers. Then we extended that out of the crowdfunding model to start providing the technical expertise for the farmers, to start providing the seeds, the fertilizer, the labor for the farmers. Then we noticed that in order to do that effectively, we needed to get the right kind of data from the farmers so that we can de-risk how they get these monies, understanding that they can pay back and then make it a sustainable business. To do that, we created a platform that allows us to aggregate farmers' data, whether biometrics, their historical data, their financial historical data, so that we can de-risk them as we present them to banks or large donors that want to extend monies to them for the right kind of inputs. In FarmCrowdy now, we have about 400,000 farmers. We're looking at how to 400,000 farmers in our network, and we're looking at how to use that model across other African countries. But looking at other parts of the value chain, there's production. In production, I've seen several technology platforms. I have a friend that was involved in using drones to provide data about traffic on the roads somewhere in West Africa. He's now moved his solution from using drones for providing traffic data to using his same drones to now provide fertilizer on the farm, to now give report about farmers' activities. And so you're seeing people now moving away from just using technology for fancy stuff, but getting into the different parts of the value chain. Same applies to processing, same applies to export and marketing. In export and marketing, you have platforms that are used to showcase what the farmers have harvested and then help them sell these across borders. I help them sell this across continents. And so
Onyeka, I can't help but interject when you talk of drones and all the other technicalities. When you look at the profile of the African farmer, I mean, these are still people who are not very techie savvy. How is the uptake?
Now, farmers are businessmen and women. If you show them how to make money, they would accept whatever technology you're giving to them. The problem is usually a lot of people want to position and design these solutions sitting from the comfort of their offices without understanding the true pain points of the farmers. Someone asked me the other day, how will the farmer use a mobile device? I tell them, if you tell the farmer that his money is sitting on a wallet in that mobile device, he will get that phone and he would follow the technology you're going to sell to him. That is the way we've been able to work with the farmers. We show them exactly the value that they want. They want to sell faster. They want to have their money safer. They want to access more funding. If we're able to profile them, or if they don't accept, we take case studies. We take farmers and turn them into ambassadors and show these other farmers how we've made this farmer move from $10 in a month to $20 in a month to $30 in a month because it's in the network. That farmer has moved from walking on the road with his harvest to moving on a bike with his harvest to having trucks taking his harvest to a certain aggregation point in order to sell what he has produced and then earning a decent margin. All the other farmers we want to join on, but that is how we have successfully shown farmers how technology can work, not from speaking on top with them, but going down to the level and showing them how it translates to business for them. So from the business angle, we are consistently onboarding the farmers within our network.
Right. Thank you, Onyeka. That's excellent work. It's all amazing initiatives that you have. I would like to introduce Michael Holter from asset management company DWS. Michael is the Senior Principal Investments and Team Leader for Sustainable Investments at DWS. And Michael, the question I have for you right now, we've heard Onyeka talk a lot about digital and cyber. What about some of the other sectors? What can government reform in, say, transport or energy to support agriculture development and growth? Michael.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I think I will come back to one point Onyeka already was elaborating on, but that's a bit for later in my answer. And generally, I would caution that investors do not really advise governments what they should do and what they do. It normally works the other way around. We observe, we say this is what the government is planning, and then we are observing what they're actually doing. And then you steer your action, and then you think about capital allocation, where you want to go, where you don't want to be. But the common ground where I think these two sides or these two plans are meeting again is what we see is we can observe what the next stage of the development of the African food and agri sector it probably will look like. And I think that's what I would like to share, given that it's also then the basis for some food for thought for governments, I would think. And there are two aspects I would like to highlight. The one is the huge potential of the processing sector, the food processing sector. We started investing in that almost now 8 years before, and we had our lessons learned. So it's not really a territory where you can go in blindfolded and you will not really suffer from significant challenges. But what nevertheless holds true, and we have been proven right in this assessment, is that the level of processing on the continent for both the local and the international consumption is low and is underutilized in many value chains. There are some that are oversaturated, but there are so many that are undersaturated. And that huge potential is where businesses are investing quite heavily in order to increase capacity, grasp market share, and expand down and upstream from the primary farming level. What we also see is that there is a trend and a friend in that, and that's the globalization. So the trend towards localizing solutions and walking away from a global centralized production of, say, wheat or soy, but rather distributing the point of production. And that requires also then to distribute the point of processing. The other aspect we observe, and that goes more into primary farming, is that there is a trend which we think is very healthy and has huge potential also to increase yields for farmers, and that's the diversification of crop. The pattern is changing, the climate pattern is changing, the globalization is kicking in, the demand in the food industry is changing, and all of that is pointing to researchers saying that if farmers can diversify their base, can diversify their source of, say, fertilizer, turn them into use of natural fertilizer instead of importing, that will do good both to their financial returns as of today, but they will also do good to the sustainability of the farming sector in general. Now, turning that into the question, what can governments do, or what's their role in this whole transition into the future? I think one core element on Onyeka, and that's where I'm picking up his point, is competency. It's a competency of farmers, it's a competency of entrepreneurs, and the competency of staff. That's key. We frequently observe in portfolio companies as well as pipeline companies, the hardest thing to get for businesses to expand is competent staff. And there is no better assurance to attract high value adding businesses into a region or into an economy or into a sector if you have well-educated people. And companies are quite willing to pay good salaries to them. That's not really the question. The question is, how can you develop a basis of people that understand mechanization, that understand how to repair, how to build up, how to maintain, and go the next level from there. So talking about drones is nothing else than you need to tell someone how to fly, right? And this educational element is not only for the government, but the government has a huge role in here because it is controlling the entry point for the workforce from the youth. I think the second point I'd like to highlight is that the bureaucracy needs to be streamlined. It needs to be predictable and rule-based for investors to gain comfort and for businesses to invest their money. And this is not really about corruption. That's not the point. And it's no different in any country on this planet. That's not an African thing. It is an element which is vital in order to have economic development to really be fueled. So the bureaucracy, from our perspective, is there to support the government to be able to rule the country, but not the other way around. The bureaucracy shouldn't rule the country by itself. And that's how we look at different countries and different areas. And that's a key assessment when we are looking at the agri value chains on the continent, which one to invest into and which one to leave out. And the last item is really then, well, which we are part of, financial markets, because that's the oil of the machine. We are managing government's money because there are many market failures where financial markets are unable to supply capital into where it can be quite positively utilized for, both from a social standpoint, but also from a return standpoint. And providing risk capital is something governments can do where there is a market failure they have identified, and that can have a quite significant leverage.
Those are very key points, Michael, just acknowledging, the role of markets and how you can work around them to develop agriculture and competence. And it's a huge challenge, I think, not just to Angola, but to all governments. And to Angola, I want to ask Antonio, is there anything you're doing, in Angola in this sectors which you can invest in, reform, or apply new regulations to, and in the end, they give you a better shot at developing agriculture in Angola.
Yes, of course. And actually, Chris has summarized very well in continuity of what was mentioned by Onyeka. But in fact, we believe that we need to, we still have some handicaps in terms of human capital. But again, with technology, we are able, in the right reforms, we are able to leapfrog. And this is one of the aspects where we believe that in Africa, especially in Angola, it's not an exception, that it is possible to achieve that. Therefore, reforms and regulations, let's say, that could affect the way transportation is done, the energy sector, what needs to be implemented to promote investment in agriculture, what changes are we require in terms of reforms, so that instead of using let's say, the traditional infrastructure, if there's an opportunity, and in Angola it's possible to use the railway. So there is a change of the mode of transportation, subject to distance and weight, to preserve the perishables, to lower costs, to reduce the risk of road accident, and by that we encourage the economy of scale. On the other end, we could then talk about the regulation, the maintenance of the road. So under which conditions the roads are made to be kept in shape, so that the transport can be done and be effective, and not to play a role as a cost, but to enable let's say the transportation from goods from the farms to the urban areas. And yet also we should consider, let's say, in terms of reforms, change the system, and when it comes to proactive installation across identified industrial poles that are connecting with the cities or in the vicinities of the city, then that is required once an investor is confirmed to assist a positive change in how energy resources are supplied. Having said that, I strongly believe that with a scalable way of looking at things, where we still recognize that there is a scarce of available human capital with access with technology, and not everyone needs to dominate that same technology, because when we mentioned the example of the drones, we can have, let's say, young entrepreneurs that are the ones that are running a small company that has the drones, and they start mapping the land, and the information that are able to share enables the government or entities that need to map the land to be considered as places to promote agriculture, and then
right.
to be attractive in terms of the investment interest. So there are many ways to optimize how we use the existing resources to still be achieving goals and improve step by step.
Right, thanks. And it's at this time that I want to introduce Vanessa Adams from the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa for some real examples. I must say, whenever I really want to kind of understand what's happening, sometimes the easiest thing to do is to pick up an agro report. So they sometimes will have very good recommendations or really good case studies. And Vanessa is the Vice President Strategic Partnerships for Inclusive Agriculture Transformation in Africa. And Vanessa, not everything, but what are some of those key agriculture success stories, that you can share with us? Is, using the mode of import substitution, while increasing farm production and reducing reliance on imports, like Angola is trying to do, like Nigeria is trying to do, both, petrodollar economies. Are there some success stories using that model, Vanessa?
Great, thank you so much. It's a fantastic panel and very interesting discussion today. I think we could continue all week like this, because the challenges are immense, the opportunities as well. So I think I want to focus on a few key points. One is that 2021 is a critical year for everybody in Africa for so many reasons. Number one, we want to recover from COVID, but we're still struggling. And we have to acknowledge that the recovery is taking longer than anybody had expected. And we're tracking, and someone mentioned earlier, the delays on investments. We see disruptions in supply chains. So the COVID reality is still very, very much with us. We're expecting a fourth wave in some countries. So health, safety are weighing on the financial and let's say mindset of investors and who want to move forward. That's the first. The second is that it's the year of the launch and the ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We've been dreaming about regional integration, and here it is with us. And how quickly can we move? How fast can we push this agenda? This will transform agriculture more than any one singular thing that we can talk about here today. So in my view, we should all be looking for and advocating and talking about and raising awareness about the game-changing size of markets, the potential for harmonization of standards, the adoption of technologies across countries. This is what we've all been working towards. Let's push forward as fast and as coherently as possible. Then the other point, which I think is so important, and those of you who know me and my boss, Dr. Kalibata, have been following, this is the year of the UN Food Systems Summit. This is a global conversation about food and agriculture of the future. If you haven't been following, get on board, get up to speed. Let's make commitments. Let's move quickly together and invest in the future of food and agriculture. We know we're coming up against a wall of climate change. We cannot ignore this. Somebody recently mentioned just now glocalization, right? We have to think globally and act locally. There's absolutely no other way. So if you come to talking about opportunities for upping the game on competitiveness of local production, we have seen really huge interest in the poultry supply chain and the aquaculture supply chains. In Southern Africa, we know that there's a lot of interest in Mozambique being really an ag sink, an ag in terms of supplying the region. There's a huge interest and in continued growth in Zambia of the agricultural sector, whether it be on seeds. Those of you who know Agra well know that we invest in seeds, and Zambia is absolutely essential to seed trade and distribution throughout the region. And this has to actually rely now, and we're working actively on digitization of seed certification and seed adoption to accelerate the performance of smallholder farmers so that the commercial investments that we're talking about, the return on investment for investors, can deliver at the rate of speed that we know is so critical. And then we also want to underscore the importance of government commitment. And I'm so happy that the Angolan government is here leading the way about this commitment. So I actually have been on the phone even with investors who are trying to invest in commercial ag in Angola even this past few weeks. So the question is, how quickly can we move on the importance of mechanization, on the importance of sustainable irrigation, on the speed of adoption of technology? When you get acceleration of investors in interest and government alignment, it's really about maintaining focus and solving problems quickly. And that can be done when there is political will. We've seen it in other countries. So I could go on, and you're trying to cut me off, but you know, I'm so excited. I want to invite you all this year to participate with AGRA on the African Green Revolution Forum, which will be taking place with a deal room and an opportunity as well, focusing on women entrepreneurs recovering from COVID.
Thanks, Vanessa. And you know, sorry to cut you off, but I know you can go on and on. And if you want to learn more about AGRA's work, they have excellent reports. I can vouch for that. I would like to introduce Giselle. She is the founder of an interesting company whose mission is based on analysis of African markets with a view of providing best agro-sector opportunities. And Giselle Lenz is, you know, the founder and, you know, CEO of Hectera Uno H1 Plus. So, Giselle, I want to ask you, what, in your view, is the best way to invest in African agriculture? Take it away.
Hi, David. How are you? Thank you so much for inviting me to this excellent panel. I'm an agronomy engineer. I run in my company here in Angola. And we identify with my company here that the best way to invest in Africa, also in Angola, is to be present in the target market. Everybody is going to say that. To try to understand the particularities in order to have a clear vision of the scope of the investment project and not to overestimate production scales by setting unattainable goals. So also the key is very important to have access to statistical information, in this case for agriculture and livestock, for the correct decision making, and also to know the target public and to whom I will be supplying a demand. As you know, here in Angola, there's two kind of business, with the big producers and with the small ones. So these are totally entire different worlds. So although in Angola this time is not necessary to have a local partner to invest, but sometimes it's necessary to have local support from key people to boost activities. So in this case, IPEX, I'm sure that can help on this. Also because agribusiness structure needs strategic alliances with leading specialists in the field for each product. And it's very important to count on professionals with experience and expertise with the development in the management of the business. Also, it's very useful to have an advisory committee that assures a solid structure and a comprehensive business and integral vision of the business. So our recommendation from Hectarea Uno is to invest, of course, in agriculture, but not only in the production of crops in large scale, but also invest in that value, allowing not only to supply the domestic market, but also have the possibility to have some exportable balance. So. All right. So our profile in our investors today, we can define the investors who join as people who seek to diversify in long-term savings outside of the financial systems. They understand very well the opportunity presented by the Angolan countryside and its derivatives, as well as the risk that is associated in any production. So.
Thank you, Giselle, for telling us about your work in Angola. Another interesting company, a specialist investor, is Agdevco. It's like I said, a specialist investor, and it's Africa focused on agribusiness. And we are lucky to have Chris Isaac today, who is the chief investment manager in the company. Chris, if we are to take a step back, could you tell us what are the challenges facing agribusiness in sub-Saharan Africa, given your experience of working in this space? Chris.
Thanks, David. I'm very pleased to join you all today. It's not easy being an agribusiness in sub-Saharan Africa, especially if you are a pioneer. You face a number of challenges. The lack of a trained management cadre, as we heard from Michael, weak or broken supply chains that you have to develop, sometimes unclear regulatory frameworks, and generally the lack of economies of scale in your industry, especially if you're the first mover. Now, those of us who are impact investors like Agdevco or development finance institutions, our role really should be to go and support those early stage firms, because they can deliver very significant public benefits. They can contribute to food security, they train senior management, they create jobs, they can help catalyze the development of new industries. Now, the problem we see is that the majority of capital from impact investors and DFIs tends to go to only a handful of established firms, those that are capable of generating commercial returns. And it doesn't typically go to the pioneers, and especially not in agriculture, and especially not in primary agriculture, because it's hard to generate those commercial returns in those early stage sectors. So the result of that is we don't see many new firms coming through the system. There's a shortage of small firms, small agribusiness firms, and consequently, there's a shortage of large agribusiness firms. I mean, most of the 10 countries in sub-Saharan Africa where we have investments, you can probably count on one hand the number of established agribusinesses. I would say we're not in the largest market on the continent, being Nigeria, where that would be different. Now, what's required to change this? Well, DFIs and impact investors need to be given a stronger and more explicit mandate by their shareholders, and that needs to be backed by significant funding to take more risk and accept overall lower returns on their portfolios. Now, if you do that, then you can expect to see more capital coming into early stage agribusinesses. You have a chance of stimulating the creation of new industries, and then you'll create more opportunities for private capital to follow. But as of today, the volumes of capital going to those parts of the market that need it most is simply too small.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for sharing those specific points with us. I now want to introduce Afshin Ghazni, who is from CDC Group, and I will be, asking you about de-risking agriculture, through insurance. But just to mention, CDC Group again has been in Africa for a long time. I recently just came across one of their reports where they rightly identified the gap, like Samuel said earlier, of that 1 billion annually in as a funding gap for agriculture, and actually channeling about $100 million to smallholder farmers in agriculture. Actually, thanks for your patience and coming to you. Is it far-fetched to say we can de-risk agriculture through insurance and reasonable financing terms, in the wake of all these things like climate change, let alone the other challenges?
Thanks, David, and I'm very pleased to be on the discussion today. I think, David, to your question, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable. I think it can't be sort of the only way of trying to de-risk sort of investments. I think the panel has rightly pointed out on a number of areas that have to sort of work together to do that. I think for us, agriculture, like colleagues have mentioned, is a priority sector for CDC. We are investing in agriculture across Africa and have been for a number of years. And we sort of will do that sort of directly as well as through intermediaries. And so hopefully we are sort of touching upon sort of the various size of businesses and into the various subsectors. We've prioritized, for example, animal protein and feed is one of those key areas that we're looking at. Yield enhancement as well. So we've heard about the importance of seed and the need to improve productivity. Also there's the huge opportunity in food processing, given sort of growing populations and the rapid urbanization, and with more integration, I think you're going to see that the scale opportunity come through, which all points towards sort of better returns. In terms of then also the role of government that's been mentioned, and the need for sort of creating that enabling environment for investors. So I think it's the point of de-risking investment is quite a broad it's a broad thing that needs to happen.
Thanks, Afshin, and I'm glad you talk of particular examples like improving and providing animal protein specifically, throughout the value chain even when you're, working through smallholder farmer programs. So thanks for that. Hopefully we might have a chance to get back to that. But I would like to, just get back to what Sam said as I asked Antonio this question about, Angola's 3 billion food bill every year. I know that Angola is going through a food, import substitution program, to save this much needed FX for its reserves. So Antonio, what I want to ask you is how far is Angola on this quest, to import substitute products worth this 3 billion annually? Do you have any targets? Can you share with us any details on what those are? And then secondly, are there any upcoming investments or partnerships that you're looking at, with either with governments or global partners in agriculture in Angola? And then after that, I will ask Samuel to just take a minute to give us 1 or 2 examples on import substitution. Antonio.
Well, David, thank you. That's another very good question. And we should, first of all, put in the fact that the results of the import substitution, they don't occur let's say on the short term. It's a program that needs to include all sorts of factors and priorities. And Angola has established those priorities to the creation of import substitution program, where agriculture plays a role, an important role, a strategic one. And because of that strategic role, we had to increase the level of allocation of resources into agriculture in our annual budget. And if we look at the 100% of the total of the budget, let's say that we are now allocating due to other constraints, since we also have public debt operation, domestic and foreign, that covers almost 90.91%. Then the remaining amount, out of that remaining amount, 2.39% is allocated specifically to agriculture. So the government cannot only rely on its own sources of funds, but this is why we, through the creation of the right environment and with reforms that are ongoing, which and as part of those reforms, APEX plays an important and key role. We believe that additional funds are going to be available and allocated to promotion of the agriculture sector. In terms of good practices and examples, there are already some. We have a good example, which is a company called AgroLeader, Nova AgroLeader, which is our largest market player. They invest in 2009 $15 million US dollars. They are stretching their production over 4,500 hectares, and they operate 2 big productions units. They are already cultivating 27 different fruits and vegetables, and working with small farmers and cooperatives, meaning that they are integrating other stakeholders within the value chain, providing more than 5,000 jobs, direct and indirect jobs countrywide. That's the kind of approach that we believe that by consolidating and producing the right results, that we are going to be able to scale up. And due to the potential that the country has on the medium term, the results are definitely going to come. Plus the geostrategic location of the country and the infrastructure that has been built to support the strategy of the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Samuel, in 30 seconds, give us 1-2 examples on import substitution.
So a quick example will be with in Ethiopia, what IFC is trying to do with the barley sector in Ethiopia, trying to transform the sector. Barley is a food crop, but also it's also an industrial crop. Malted barley is used by the brewery sector, and currently in Ethiopia, a lot of it is imported for the brewery sector. what we have done there is to enter into partnerships with key stakeholders to support the sustainable development of the barley supply chain. And three ways that we are doing this. We are facilitating the farmers' access to reliable markets. So that is the first incentive, the fact that they know that when they produce the barley, there is somebody who is ready to buy it. The second one is that we are assisting them with improved seeds and inputs, and then in addition, providing agronomic training for the farmers. And the third element is that we also provide them with business management training, and then and even for the aggregators, that is the middlemen that are in the supply chain, we also provide training to them. I mean, very good results. What the results that we have achieved so far is the doubling of yields. So yields have doubled from 2.4 metric tons to 5 metric tons. We've supported about 38,000 small holder farmers. We want to increase it to 90,000. But most importantly is that they've produced 89,000 metric tons of barley with an estimated value of $46 million.
Those are excellent results. Thank you so much, Samuel, for sharing that. I've been informed we now have, Dr. Jao, who I will introduce, in a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to ask Antonio to just translate the question that I'm going to ask, in Portuguese, and then, translate for us the answer from Dr. Jao. So, Dr. Jao Manuel do Couto is Angola's Secretary of State for Agriculture and Livestock. That's how far we've gone as far as Angolan government representation comes today. So thank you so much, Dr. Jao, for your patience, being on the panel. And the question that I have for Dr. Jao, with all that, you have done in agriculture and your push to develop agriculture, where do you see the sector in 2 or 3 years in terms of leapfrogging and its contribution to the general GDP of Angola?
Bom, a pergunta é aonde é que, Excelência Senhor Secretário, vê a evolução nos próximos 3 anos da produção agrícola, por formas a que ela permita Angola dar um salto efetivo?
Gostaria, antes de mais, pedir as minhas sinceras desculpas pelo atraso e agradecer a todos os presentes, saudá-los e agradecer a todos os presentes por podermos partilhar um pouco as nossas experiências.
I would like, first of all, to express my apologies for being a bit late, and I will gladly share with you our experiences.
O Angola, portanto, como do vosso conhecimento, tem grande potencial para crescer em vários produtos, em várias cadeias produtivas.
Angola, as you know, has a huge potential to grow in a variety of value chains.
Para os próximos 3 anos, temos prioridades bem definidas, como, por exemplo, o desenvolvimento da cadeia produtiva dos cereais.
For the next 3 years, we have very well-defined priorities. As an example, on the cereal value chain production.
E nos cereais estamos a falar precisamente do milho, do arroz.
When talking about cereals, we are talking about maize, rice.
Estamos a falar do sorgo e da maçambala.
We are also talking about maçambala. Miet and sorghum. Okay.
Yes. Também temos grande objetivo, grande potencial para crescermos na produção de soja e na produção de feijão.
We also have a huge potential to grow in the soja bean production and beans.
A outra grande prioridade vai para a produção de raízes e tubérculos. Estamos a falar da mandioca, caçava, e estamos a falar da batata, sweet potatoes.
The direction where we think we could also grow is in roots and cassava and sweet potatoes.
Exato. Terceiro, digamos, produto que nós pretendemos apostar seriamente tem a ver com a produção de hortícolas.
A third product that we want to bet very seriously is the production of horticulture products.
Para o caso das fruteiras, estamos apostados em desenvolver todo o segmento de frutas tropicais.
In the case of the fruits, we are willing to develop the tropical fruits,
nomeadamente banana, ananás,
more specifically bananas, pineapple,
abacate,
avocado.
E também, portanto, estamos a falar em algumas frutas tropicais de grande interesse, como a manga, citrinos, fundamentalmente.
And also we are talking about tropical fruits with a very high market value, like mangoes and citrus. No?
Também, no que concerne a culturas industriais, estamos apostados em desenvolver a cultura do café, do cacau.
And also in terms of industrial crops, we are talking about cocoa and coffee.
E também a cultura do palmar e a cultura do algodão.
And also the culture of palm oil and cotton.
Exato. No que concerne a produção pecuária, nossos objetivos para os próximos 3 anos estão virados fundamentalmente para o desenvolvimento da cadeia de produção de aves de corte, portanto, frangos.
Regarding livestock, our future objectives are related to the production of aves de corte. Diga?
Frango de corte.
Frango. So, chicken.
E yes. Também a produção de ovos, eggs.
And also the egg productions.
Exato. Depois temos a produção de suínos.
We then have the production of suínos seriam
porcos. Porcos, pigs.
Sí, pork, yes.
Yeah. And Antonio, can I request to, interject, so that Dr. João can wrap up and, we move on to the next point.
Ok. Caro secretário, podíamos só fazer sumarizar e para depois passarmos para outra questão.
Então, era a produção de porcos e a produção de caprinos, animais de pequeno porte, e também posteriormente a produção de bovinos. Era isso que nós pretendemos para a agricultura nos próximos 3 anos para Angola, no que concerne as principais culturas.
So in livestock, we will then be looking at the production of mid-size livestock, so that summarizes our priorities for the next couple of years.
E todo o investimento que pretendemos fazer vai nesse sentido, porque há condições edafoclimáticas para o efeito.
Meaning, having said that, in terms of poultry, small ruminants, and bovino culture, and all the investments are in line with those priorities.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. João, for all those comments, and thank you so much, Antonio, for your services. I just want to let 30 seconds each for just these 2 or 3 questions. We cannot conclude the discussion without me asking about the impact of COVID-19 on farming and the way forward. And whoever is available, please can respond to that. And then the other will be on climate change, which I'll request Vanessa to talk about in half a minute. But first, COVID-19 and the way forward. Where does Africa go from here? Who wants to go first?
Maybe just to say, David, even though you invited me on the second point, that we've been publishing actually reports regularly on food security in Africa. We're all needing to watch very closely fluctuations in prices and the nexus between any impending climate change incidents, locusts, or other impairments on production. We learned very quickly last year that the governments needed real-time access to data about trade across borders in terms of available stocks and inventories. Standards have been increasingly important. And of course, in all of this, we're focusing on nutrition because malnourishment, of course, will actually hurt an entire decade and generation. Thank you.
Right.
So, David, yeah, David, quickly on that, I would say that from our experience, that is from the IFC's experience, the impact varies. Really, it depends on countries and also the crops and potentially the routes to market as well. So we found out that food crops in general have been quite resilient. And even with the loss of income, I mean, families, population continue to purchase their basic staple food. I mean, where there have been a bit of challenges is around the cash crops like cotton and cocoa, for instance, where demand has fallen and it has impacted price as well. Look, I think the key thing is that from our side, that is from the investor side, we need to continue to support the small farmers, especially to diversify where possible, to diversify into other crops that are currently being have better demand, and see how we can support them with input financing and different type of financing programs.
All right, thank you so much, Samuel.
David, if I may, our thinking at the moment is there is no post-COVID. There is a life with COVID. That's what we get ready for.
We have to adapt. I like that, Michael. Thank you so much. And on that note, a final thank you to all who have participated in today's event. We will send you the event highlights article once it is complete. Thank you so much again. This event is again sponsored by IPEX, and have a good day. Bye-bye.